The night was supposed to be ordinary, a storm, an empty road, a stranger stranded in the dark. But when Emily stopped, she didn't just save a man. She stepped into the orbit of Adrian Blackwell, the billionaire everyone feared. What began as an act of kindness unraveled into trust, betrayal, and a choice that would either shatter them forever, or teach them both what it means to stay. She pulled over to help a stranger. He was the billionaire everyone feared. One storm changed everything: trust, betrayal, and a love that might cost them everything. But when silence shattered, would he fight for her? Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back, my amazing family and friends. I'm so glad you're here today because this story is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. If you're hooked already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing our family from all over the world come together. And stay tuned, because tomorrow, I'll have another story just as gripping, and you won't want to miss it. Now, let's dive right in. The storm had been threatening all afternoon, but by nightfall the rain came down in sheets, streaking the windshield like ribbons of liquid glass. Emily Carter tightened her grip on the steering wheel, leaning forward as though that might help her see through the darkness. Her gas tank was half full, the road was empty, and every sensible thought urged her to keep driving until she reached town. But Emily was not always sensible. That flaw, if you could call it that, had been stitched into her since childhood. She was the girl who brought home stray cats, the teenager who sat with strangers in hospital waiting rooms, the woman who worked double shifts at the library just to fund a literacy program for kids who weren't hers. Compassion ruled her, and sometimes it bled into recklessness. Tonight, it showed in the way she whispered, "You're fine, just another 20 minutes, even though the storm was worsening and the road ahead had no lights. Her friends often told her she cared too much, that the world wasn't kind enough to give back what she offered. They were right, she'd been burned before, but Emily never could stop herself. Behind her, the wipers squealed against the glass, fighting the rain's rhythm. She adjusted the dial on the radio, finding nothing but static, and sighed. Solitude had always been a comfort, yet tonight it felt heavier than usual, pressing against her chest. Maybe it was the storm. Maybe it was the way the dark seemed endless. On the other side of the county, in a mansion perched like a fortress above the city, Adrian Blackwell stood at a floor-to-ceiling window, staring at the storm's rage. His reflection stared back, sharp lines of a man in his late 30s, eyes that could freeze a room, posture honed by years of commanding respect and instilling fear. The world knew him as the billionaire who had clawed his empire from ruin, turning failing industries into gold. They called him ruthless. Some called him cursed. Many whispered his name as though it carried weight too dangerous to say aloud. He didn't mind. Fear was useful. But the truth, buried under headlines and hushed boardroom gossip, was far less glamorous. Adrian was tired. Tired of the constant games, the lawyers, the lies, the hollow conversations with people who wanted his fortune more than his company. Tired of remembering the betrayal that had nearly broken him a decade ago, when someone he loved had torn his life apart in the name of money. Trust had died that year. And with it, warmth. Now he lived inside walls built of wealth and solitude, with only power as company. Even tonight, staring out at the storm, there was no one to call, no one to laugh with, no one to care whether he made it through another night. He clenched his jaw and turned away, pacing toward the long corridor that led to his study. The phone on his desk buzzed, flashing with a message from his head of security. A warning: the roads were flooding, the weather was dangerous. Adrian smirked faintly. He didn't need their concern. The one rule of his life had always been simple: rely on no one. Emily's headlights cut through the rain as she turned onto a narrow back road, hoping it might shave a few minutes off her drive. The trees pressed close on either side, their branches shuddering under the storm's weight. She slowed, tension rippling through her. That was when she saw it. A car pulled half off the road, hazard lights blinking weakly through the downpour. Her first instinct was to press harder on the gas, to slip by and pretend she hadn't seen. After all, this was exactly the kind of situation her friends warned her about, stopping for strangers alone at night. Her pulse quickened. She whispered, "Don't be stupid, Em. Keep going." But the memory of her father years ago, fixing a stranger's flat tire in the rain, surfaced. He had always said, "You don't drive past someone in need. Not if you can help." So Emily slowed. Her heart thudded. The rain drummed louder. She pulled over a few yards behind the stalled vehicle, headlights illuminating the slick road like a stage. She hadn't stepped out yet. That moment, the choice to help, still lingered like a weight in her chest. Across the road and a lifetime away, Adrian cursed under his breath as the engine sputtered again. The storm had drowned the car in minutes, leaving him stranded. He had ignored every warning, determined to drive himself home from a meeting instead of letting his chauffeur handle it. Independence was his armor, his proof that he didn't need anyone. Now he was forced to admit, if only to himself, that the night had bested him. Through the veil of rain, headlights cut through the dark. A second car slowed. Stopped. Adrian's instinct flared hot, suspicion, mistrust. No one stopped out here unless they wanted something. And with his reputation, he knew better than to trust kindness. Still, his chest tightened as he saw the figure step out of the car, holding her coat tight against the rain, moving toward him. The rain lashed sideways, soaking Emily's coat the moment she stepped out. Cold needles of water ran down her neck, seeping into her sweater. The storm swallowed sound, muffling everything but the relentless roar of water hitting earth. Her boots splashed through puddles as she moved closer to the stranded car, her breath coming shallow and fast. Her hands were already trembling, partly from the cold, partly from the thought that she might be walking into danger. She stopped a few feet from the driver's side window and raised her voice. "Hey, do you need help?" The window lowered halfway, revealing the shadow of a man inside. Even through the streaks of rain and the dim glow of her headlights, she caught the sharpness of his gaze. A pair of storm-gray eyes locked onto hers, cool and assessing. "I don't need help," he said flatly. His voice carried over the rain, deep and edged, the kind of voice that could command silence in a boardroom, or crush a conversation before it began. Emily hesitated. Her instincts screamed to retreat. This was exactly the kind of man her friends warned her about. Curt, unreadable, dangerous in a way you couldn't quite define. She could have nodded, muttered an apology, and hurried back to her car. But she didn't. "You're stranded out here," she said, raising her voice again. "The engine's dead, isn't it?" His jaw tightened. He didn't answer. She took a small step closer, forcing calm into her tone. "Look, I'm not a mechanic, but my uncle taught me a thing or two. Maybe I can help." For a moment, silence stretched between them. The rain drummed on the roof of the car, ran in rivulets down the windows, pooled in the cracks of the road. Then the man pushed the door open and stepped out. Emily's breath hitched. He was taller than she expected, his presence filling the narrow stretch of road like a wall. His black coat clung to his frame, rain running off in steady streams. Even in the storm, he carried himself like someone used to control, someone who never bent, until now. Up close, she recognized him. Her heart stuttered. It couldn't be. The sharp cheekbones, the piercing eyes, the air of authority that seemed to ripple off him even in silence. There was no mistaking it. Adrian Blackwell. The billionaire. The recluse. The man whispered about in headlines with words like ruthless and feared. Her pulse thundered. What in the world was he doing here, alone, on a deserted road? Emily swallowed hard, forcing herself to hide the recognition. She couldn't just stare. "You've got steam under the hood," she managed, nodding toward the faint mist rising from the car. "It's overheated." Adrian studied her, rain plastering his dark hair to his forehead. He looked less like the untouchable tycoon in glossy magazines and more like a man caught in a storm, yet still impossibly untouchable. "You shouldn't have stopped," he said. His voice was even, but there was an undercurrent there, warning or concern, she couldn't tell. Emily crossed her arms, partly to keep from shivering, partly to keep from shrinking under that gaze. "Maybe not. But I did. So, do you want me to take a look or not?" For the first time, something flickered across his expression. A crack in the mask, hesitation, perhaps even disbelief. Finally, he stepped back. "Do what you want." The hood was hot to the touch, hissing as she unlatched it. Steam burst out, carrying the sharp scent of burned coolant. Emily coughed, blinking against the heat. "You've run this thing too hard in the rain," she said, peering into the engine. "Probably just needs time to cool, maybe some water." Adrian stood a few feet away, arms crossed, his gaze never leaving her. She could feel it, heavy, sharp, weighing her down even as she worked. "You speak like you've done this before," he said finally. She shrugged, brushing wet hair from her face. My uncle fixed cars for a living. I used to hang around his shop. Another silence stretched. Emily kept her focus on the engine, though her nerves buzzed. It wasn't just the storm or the eerie emptiness of the road. It was him. His presence pressed against her, cold and magnetic all at once. And beneath it, she felt something she hadn't expected: weariness. Not weakness exactly, but a kind of exhaustion etched into the way he stood, as if the storm outside wasn't the only one battering him. She closed the hood gently. "You'll have to wait it out. If you've got water, we can try topping it off." "I don't." Her lips parted in a faint laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Of course not." Her gaze darted to her car. She had a half-empty water bottle in the cup holder. It wasn't much, but it was something. "I've got a little. Not enough to get you far, but maybe into town." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "Why are you doing this?" Emily blinked. "Doing what?" "Helping." The word came out sharp, almost an accusation. She met his stare, her heart hammering. The easy answer was the truth, that she couldn't drive past someone stranded in the rain. But something in his tone told her he wouldn't believe it. "Still," she said softly, "because you needed it." The rain softened for a moment, as if the storm itself paused to listen. Adrian didn't reply. He just looked at her, as though she'd spoken in a language he hadn't heard in years. They stood like that, two strangers on a deserted road, water streaming off their coats, silence thick between them. Emily clutched the hood of her jacket tighter, her pulse a wild drum. She had no idea what she'd just stepped into. And Adrian, for all his wealth and power, for all the myths built around his name, stood there with something raw flickering in his gaze. Something like disbelief. The storm still raged, but neither of them moved. The spark had been struck. Neither knew what it would ignite. Emily's hands shook as she unscrewed the cap of her water bottle. Her breath came out in little puffs, half from the cold and half from the awareness of who was standing a few feet away. Adrian Blackwell. She tried not to look at him as she poured the water carefully into the radiator, steam rising in ghostly curls. "Not much," she muttered. "But it should give you enough to start the engine when it cools." He didn't thank her. Didn't move, either. Just stood there, his dark silhouette blurred by rain, arms crossed like a judge waiting for her defense. Finally, he spoke. "You shouldn't trust strangers on the road. Especially not in weather like this." Emily capped the bottle and slid it back into her pocket. "You're one to talk." His brow lifted, the faintest twitch of surprise at her retort. "I didn't ask you to stop. And yet here we are." Her tone came sharper than she intended, but the tension was eating at her. She couldn't stop herself from imagining the stories she'd heard about him, how he'd crushed competitors, how employees whispered his name with a mix of awe and fear. The man in front of her was more myth than human. And she'd walked right up to him in the middle of a storm. The realization crawled up her spine. "What am I doing here?" She took a half step back, clutching her jacket tighter. "Look, once the engine cools, you'll be fine. Just wait it out." Adrian tilted his head, studying her like she was a puzzle. "Why not just leave?" Emily blinked at him. "You've done your good deed. Most people would have driven on by. You don't strike me as naive. So what do you want?" The words struck hard, laced with suspicion. Not curiosity, suspicion. Emily stiffened. "Want?" "Yes." He stepped closer, the rain dripping off his coat, his voice low but sharp. "Everyone wants something." Her throat tightened. She forced herself not to retreat further. "Not me." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "You expect me to believe that?" The way he said it made her pulse race. It wasn't arrogance, it was certainty, as if life had taught him that no one, absolutely no one, gave without taking. Emily swallowed hard, struggling to hold his gaze. "Believe what you want. I just couldn't drive past." Her words hung in the rain-heavy air, unshaken but fragile. Headlights cut suddenly through the storm. Both turned sharply as a truck approached from the opposite direction, its tires hissing through puddles. It slowed when it neared, the driver's window rolling down to reveal a middle-aged man with a weathered face. "You folks all right out here?" he called, raising his voice over the storm. Emily forced a relieved smile. We're okay, thank you. Just a breakdown. The man squinted past her, recognition flashing across his features when his eyes landed on Adrian. He let out a low whistle. Well, I'll be damned. Blackwell himself, stuck in the mud. Adrian's jaw clenched. Keep driving. The man chuckled uneasily, shifting in his seat. Didn't mean nothing by it. Just, never thought I'd see you out here like the rest of us. Emily noticed the way his voice shifted, deference laced with fear. She'd seen that look before, in the eyes of people who crossed the wrong name in town. The kind of fear that said don't get too close, or you'll regret it. Appreciate the concern, Emily cut in quickly, hoping to defuse the tension. We're fine. Really? The man hesitated, his gaze flicking between her and Adrian, then nodded stiffly. All right. Good luck. The truck rumbled back into the storm, tail lights glowing briefly before fading into the dark. Emily exhaled shakily. Friend of yours. Adrian's eyes were cold. I don't have friends. Her stomach tightened. She believed him. They waited in silence for the engine to cool, Emily pacing slowly in the glow of her headlights. Adrian leaned against the car, unmoving, arms folded. The storm had eased into a steady downpour, but the tension between them had not. Finally, she broke it. You know, not everyone is out to use you. His head lifted, his gaze sharp. Spoken like someone who hasn't lived long enough to learn better. Emily bristled. Or maybe spoken like someone who refuses to stop seeing the worst in people. He pushed off the car, stepping closer. The rain drummed on the pavement, steady and relentless. Let me guess, he said softly. You believe kindness is its own reward. That helping strangers on dark roads makes the world a better place. Something like that, she snapped. His expression hardened, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of something, pain maybe buried deep. That's the quickest way to get broken. The words cut more than she expected. She should have turned away, should have ended this strange encounter before it dug deeper. But instead she found herself saying, maybe being broken isn't the worst thing. Maybe staying closed off is. For the first time, Adrian didn't have a ready reply. His jaw flexed, eyes narrowing, but no words came. Emily's pulse quickened. She hadn't meant to provoke him. And yet, something in his silence felt like the first tiny fracture in a wall too high to climb. The car's engine coughed when Adrian finally turned the key. The radiator hissed, but the vehicle came to life with a low growl. Relief flickered across Emily's face, but he showed none. You should go, he said, before the road floods worse. His tone was final, dismissive. Emily's throat tightened. She wanted to protest, to say something more, to ask why a man like him was out here alone, but her better sense finally won. She had already risked enough. She stepped back toward her car. Take care of yourself. The words felt flimsy, but they were all she could offer. Adrian watched her retreat, his expression unreadable. The rain poured between them like a curtain. When she slipped behind her wheel, her hands clung to the steering wheel. Her heart pounded. She had walked away alive. That should have been enough. But as her headlights swept across Adrian one last time, standing alone in the storm, surrounded by shadows, something twisted in her chest. For all his wealth, all his power, all his walls, he looked achingly, devastatingly human. And Emily hated herself for caring. Emily's tires spun uselessly in the mud. She gripped the steering wheel tighter, pumping the gas, but the car lurched only an inch before sinking deeper. No, 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 she groaned, slamming her palm against the wheel. Her headlights illuminated the curtain of rain and the empty stretch of road. She was alone. Except she wasn't. A tap on her window made her jolt. Adrian stood outside, rain dripping off his hair, his coat heavy with water. He motioned for her to roll the window down. She hesitated, then pressed the button. You're stuck, he said simply. Emily's stomach sank. I can see that. Reverse, then rocket forward. Slowly. His tone was clipped, commanding. She followed his instructions, but the wheels only spun, spraying mud behind her. The engine whined in protest. Adrian sighed. Without asking, he moved to the back of her car, bracing his hands against the trunk. His shoes sank into the muck as he pushed. Try again. Emily shifted gears and pressed the pedal gently. The car rocked forward an inch, then slipped back. Adrian gritted his teeth and shoved harder. Again. She tried once more. Nothing. Finally, Adrian stepped aside, breath heavy, coat plastered to him. He leaned against the trunk, water running down his face, and muttered, "It's not going anywhere." Emily shut off the engine, her hands trembling. Silence filled the car, broken only by the storm's endless hiss. She lowered her forehead to the steering wheel. Perfect. Just perfect. When she looked up, he was still there, watching her. "You can't stay here," he said. "This road will flood in an hour." The weight of his words settled on her chest. He wasn't exaggerating. She'd seen water already creeping across the pavement. If it rose too high, they'd be stranded, or worse. "Then what do you suggest?" she asked, her voice tighter than she intended. Adrian's jaw tightened. He clearly disliked the answer as much as she did. "My car still runs. Barely. It'll make it to the next town." Her pulse quickened. He didn't need to spell it out. If she wanted out of this, she'd have to go with him. Emily hesitated. Every instinct warned against climbing into a car with Adrian Blackwell. The man radiated danger in a way she couldn't name. Yet the alternative, waiting alone on a flooding road, wasn't safer. "You'd rather stay here," he pressed, reading her silence. She exhaled shakily. "Fine. Let's go." The interior of Adrian's car smelled faintly of leather and smoke. The heater whirred weakly, fogging the edges of the windshield. Emily sat rigid in the passenger seat, her damp clothes clinging to her skin, every nerve aware of the man driving beside her. He gripped the wheel with steady hands, eyes fixed on the dark road ahead. His presence filled the car, heavy and magnetic, and though he said nothing, she felt the weight of words unsaid pressing between them. Finally, she broke the silence. "You don't have to look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you're waiting for me to admit I want something from you." His lips curved in the faintest, humorless smirk. "Do you?" Emily bristled. "No. Everyone does." There it is again. She turned toward him, her voice sharper than before. "That wall you carry around like armor. Not everyone's out to take from you, Adrian." The sound of his name in her mouth shifted something, brief, almost invisible. His hands tightened on the wheel. "And what about you?" he asked quietly. Emily froze. "What do you want, Emily?" Her name in his voice sent a jolt through her. It wasn't flirtation, it was demand, edged with something darker, fear maybe or anger. She swallowed hard. "I want to get out of this storm alive. That's all." The car rattled as they hit a pothole. Neither spoke for a long stretch of road, the silence thick with everything they weren't saying. The storm worsened, lightning cracking across the sky, thunder shaking the frame of the car. Water surged across the asphalt in shallow waves. Emily clutched the door handle. Should we even be driving through this? Adrian's jaw clenched. "We don't have a choice." The road ahead curved sharply around a fallen tree, forcing him to slow. The car shuddered as water splashed against the tires. Emily's heart hammered. "Tick-tock," Adrian muttered under his breath. She shot him a startled look. He gestured toward the rising floodwaters. "We have maybe 30 minutes before this road is gone." There it was, the ticking clock. They were racing not just against distance, but against nature itself. Emily pressed her lips together, trying to steady her breathing. She wasn't sure which terrified her more, the storm or the man beside her. The wipers squealed, struggling to keep up. Emily stared out at the blur of trees, her thoughts tangled. Finally, she spoke again. "Why were you out here alone, anyway? Someone like you doesn't just drive himself through back roads in a storm." Adrian's expression didn't shift. "Someone like me? You know what I mean." She forced herself to meet his gaze, even briefly. "You don't exactly blend in." He didn't answer right away. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, scanning the dark road behind them, then back ahead. "Not everything has to be a conspiracy," he said finally. But his tone betrayed something, evasiveness. Emily frowned, sensing the subtext. He wasn't telling her the full truth. "Fine," she muttered. "Keep your secrets." Adrian's mouth twitched, almost a smile but not quite. That's the smartest thing you've said tonight. She turned sharply toward the window, stung. You're welcome, by the way. For stopping. For helping. For giving a damn when everyone else wouldn't. The words came out hotter than she meant. Silence followed. For a long moment, Adrian didn't reply. Then, so quietly she almost missed it, he said, "That's exactly why you shouldn't have." Emily turned back toward him. His expression was unreadable, but his voice carried something she hadn't expected: regret. The storm pressed harder against the car, water rising on both sides of the road like walls closing in. Yet inside, another storm swirled: tension, mistrust, compassion, and something neither of them dared to name. They were trapped together by circumstance. Forced to share space, forced to share silence. And for the first time, Adrian Blackwell, the man who trusted no one, wasn't entirely sure what frightened him more, the storm outside or the woman beside him. The rain had slowed into a steady patter by the time Adrian pulled the car into the parking lot of a shuttered diner. The neon sign flickered weakly, casting patches of red light across the wet pavement. Closed. Deserted. He killed the engine. The sudden silence pressed down heavier than the storm. Emily hugged her coat tighter, shivering in the stillness. Why here? Higher ground, he said. The road behind us is already gone. We wait it out. Emily glanced at the locked doors of the diner, then back at him. So we just sit here? His eyes flicked to hers. Unless you have a better plan. She didn't. She rubbed her hands together, breath fogging in the cold. Minutes passed in quiet, filled only by the ticking of the cooling engine. Adrian sat motionless, staring out the windshield like the storm still raged inside him. Finally, Emily broke the silence. You talk like someone who's used to being disappointed. His head turned slowly toward her. And you talk like someone who hasn't been disappointed enough. Her chest tightened. She wanted to snap back, but instead she whispered, "You'd be surprised." Something in her tone made him pause. For once his gaze softened. Not much, but enough for her to feel the weight of his curiosity. Emily stared down at her damp hands. She hadn't meant to open the door to her own past. But maybe the storm, the silence, the surrealness of being trapped with him, it pulled at her edges. My mom left when I was 8, she said finally. Her voice wavered but held steady. One day she was there. The next, she wasn't. Dad did his best. He taught me to see people. To never leave anyone stranded, no matter what. Her throat tightened. He died when I was 19. Heart attack. I was the one who found him. Adrian said nothing. Just watched her, his face unreadable. Emily exhaled shakily. That's why I stopped tonight. I could hear his voice in my head. He wouldn't have forgiven me if I drove past. Silence. Heavy. Almost unbearable. Then quietly, Adrian asked, "Do you regret it?" Emily blinked at him. Stopping. Yes. She thought about it, the fear, the danger, the way his presence made her pulse race. Then she shook her head slowly. No. Adrian's jaw tightened, his gaze flicking away. His fingers drummed once on the steering wheel before stilling. Emily studied him. His silence wasn't indifference. It was restraint. Like a dam holding back too much water. What about you? She asked softly. His head snapped toward her. What about me? What made you this way? She gestured vaguely, though she knew he'd understand. Cold. Guarded. Always assuming the worst. His eyes darkened. For a moment, she thought he'd shut down completely. Then, against expectation, he spoke. I was 27 when my company nearly collapsed, he said, his voice low. The only person I trusted, my business partner, stole everything. Not just money. He leaked contracts, destroyed relationships, left me with debts I couldn't pay. Emily's chest ached. That's... Don't. His tone was sharp, but beneath it was something brittle. Don't pity me. She bit her lip, swallowing the words. Adrian looked past her, eyes fixed on something far away. When I tried to fight back, people turned. Investors, friends, even family. They saw me drowning and pushed me under. No one offered a hand. No one but lawyers who charged by the hour. His hands tightened on the wheel, knuckles pale. So I learned. Everyone wants something. Loyalty doesn't exist. Trust is a weapon handed to your enemy. The air between them thickened. Emily wanted to reach across the space, to tell him he wasn't alone anymore, but she knew he'd recoil. Instead, she whispered, "And yet here you are. Letting me sit in your car." His eyes flicked to hers. Sharp. Searching. For a heartbeat, it felt like he might snap. Instead, his mouth curved in something between a smirk and a grimace. "Don't mistake necessity for trust." Her chest tightened, but she didn't look away. Maybe necessity is where trust starts. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the diner for a brief second. The light flashed across Adrian's face, revealing something raw in his eyes. Emily wondered if anyone else had ever seen him like this. Not the billionaire, not the untouchable recluse, but a man stripped bare by memory. The silence stretched until it ached. She filled it with the only truth she had left. "You know," she said softly, "your partner may have betrayed you, but you let him define the rest of your life. You let him steal more than money. He stole your faith in people." His jaw worked, but he didn't answer. She leaned back against the seat, exhaustion pulling at her. "Maybe that's what you should be angry about." Adrian turned away, his profile etched in shadow. He didn't argue. He didn't agree. But his silence spoke louder than either. Minutes ticked by. The storm softened into drizzle. The world outside was still, the diner dark and quiet, as though holding its breath. Inside the car, two lives sat side by side, separate, colliding, unraveling. Emily felt the sting of her own confession, the weight of his. Their wounds were different, yet mirrored: abandonment, betrayal, loss. Both had been left standing alone when they needed someone most. She closed her eyes briefly. She hadn't expected to feel this strange connection in the middle of nowhere with a man everyone feared. When she opened them, Adrian was still staring straight ahead. But his hands had loosened on the wheel. The night carried them forward, not with action but with truth. Emily had given him her story. He had given her his. Neither had intended to. But sometimes storms stripped everything down to what was real. And what lingered between them now was more dangerous than the floodwaters. The rain had dwindled to a mist, soft against the diner's windows. The storm's fury had passed, leaving behind silence broken only by the occasional drip of water from the eaves. Inside Adrian's car, the air was heavy with everything they'd said, and everything they hadn't. Emily shifted uncomfortably, hugging her knees closer to her chest. Her clothes clung cold against her skin. She could feel exhaustion creeping into her bones, the weight of the night pressing hard. "You're shivering," Adrian said suddenly. His voice startled her, low and quiet. He reached into the back seat and pulled out a blanket, tossing it into her lap without ceremony. Emily blinked down at it. Thanks. Don't mention it." His gaze stayed fixed forward, but the smallest twitch of his jaw betrayed discomfort. She draped the blanket around herself, warmth seeping slowly back into her limbs. The gesture wasn't tender, at least, not in the way most people might imagine. But coming from him, it was monumental. And for the first time that night, Emily felt the corners of her lips curve. Minutes later, she found herself whispering, "You know, for a man everyone says is ruthless, you're not very good at playing the part." Adrian's head turned, brow arching. "Excuse me. You gave me a blanket." Her smile tilted wryly. "That's not exactly terrifying." His eyes narrowed, though not with anger. "Compassion doesn't erase cruelty." Emily shrugged. "Or maybe cruelty doesn't erase compassion." The silence that followed was thick, but not hostile. She tilted her head, studying him. "Has anyone ever told you you're exhausting to argue with?" That almost smile flickered again at his mouth. "Frequently." The sound of it, the faintest crack of humor, made her chest loosen. She chuckled softly, the sound foreign in the heavy quiet. For a moment, it was almost absurd. Two strangers, stranded in a storm, sitting in a car outside a diner, debating kindness like it mattered more than survival. But it did matter. It mattered because it was the first time since meeting him that she didn't feel like prey under his gaze. An hour slipped by. Emily leaned her head against the cool glass of the window, watching raindrops trail like tiny rivers. Adrian hadn't spoken for some time, his profile a sculpture in shadow. But she could feel his presence, steady and grounding. Finally, she whispered, "You asked what I wanted earlier." His gaze shifted toward her. "I do want something," she admitted. Her voice trembled, not from fear but from the weight of the truth. "Not from you specifically. From life. I want to matter. To someone. To know I made a difference." The words spilled out before she could stop them. Vulnerability always scared her, but silence scared her more. She closed her eyes, bracing for the sharp retort she expected. Instead, Adrian's voice came quiet. "You already do." Her eyes flew open. He didn't look at her. He stared straight ahead, his expression unreadable, but his words hung in the air like fragile glass. Emily's breath caught. "How could you possibly know that?" He finally turned, his gaze steady on hers. "Because a woman who stops for a stranger in the middle of a storm, when every reason tells her to keep driving, she matters. More than she realizes." The car felt suddenly smaller. Warmer. Her pulse thundered in her ears, not from fear this time but from something she didn't dare name. Adrian shifted his gaze away, as though embarrassed by his own admission. "Don't ask me to say it again." A quiet laugh broke from her throat, shaky but real. "Don't worry. Once was enough." The hours stretched, the night slowly lifting its grip. They spoke in fits and starts, not about business empires or betrayals or abandonment, but about smaller things. Emily told him how she loved the smell of old books, how she secretly hated coffee but drank it anyway, how she once tried to rescue a bird that had pecked her hand raw. Adrian listened, his sharp edges dulled by fatigue. He didn't share as freely, but when he did, the glimpses startled her. How he once wanted to be an architect before business consumed him, how he remembered the exact creak of the stairs in the house where he grew up, how silence was both his punishment and his armor. Emily laughed at the unexpected softness in those details. "You're full of surprises, you know that?" His mouth curved faintly. "Don't tell anyone." It wasn't much, but it was enough to feel like a door had cracked open. Later, when exhaustion finally tugged Emily into silence, she let her head rest against the seat. The blanket warmed her shoulders. Adrian remained awake, his posture rigid but his eyes softened by thought. For a long moment, he simply watched her breathe. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel what it was like not to be alone. The morning light was pale and weak, filtering through the mist that still clung to the empty diner parking lot. Emily stretched stiffly beneath the blanket, blinking as her eyes adjusted. The storm had passed, but the heaviness in her chest hadn't. Adrian was already awake, standing outside the car, his back to her. He was on the phone, his voice low and sharp. "No, handle it yourself. I don't care what they said in the press conference. The board can wait until I arrive." A pause, then harder. "Do not let them leak anything about last night." Emily froze, half hidden by the window glass. His words carried an edge she hadn't heard since before the storm, commanding, ruthless, the voice of the man the world feared. Her stomach twisted. Leak anything about last night? What could he possibly mean by that? She slipped out of the car quietly, her boots crunching on gravel. Who was that? Adrian turned, startled. For the briefest moment, she saw something flicker in his eyes, guilt, or maybe calculation. Then his mask slid back into place. "Business. Business that involves me," she pressed. His jaw tightened. "You shouldn't have heard that." Emily's chest tightened. "So it does involve me." "Emily," his tone sharpened. "This is bigger than you. Walk away." The words struck like a blade. After everything, after the blanket, the banter, the confession, he wanted her to believe she was nothing but a complication to be erased. Her voice trembled, but not from fear. "Is that what you do to people? Use them when it suits you, then shove them aside when it doesn't?" Adrian's expression hardened, but his silence was louder than any denial. The fragile trust she had begun to build with him cracked, splintered. She thought of his partner's betrayal, of the walls he carried like armor, of how she had believed, stupidly, that she could be different. She stepped back, the blanket slipping from her shoulders into the mud. "Don't worry," she said, her voice raw. "I won't be your weakness." The words hung between them like broken glass. Adrian felt them cut deep, deeper than he wanted to admit. He opened his mouth to speak, to explain, to undo the damage, but the rumble of an approaching vehicle stole the chance. A black SUV rolled into the lot, tires spraying water. Two men in suits stepped out, their movements sharp, practiced. "Mr. Blackwell," one said crisply. "We were tracking your location. Headquarters is in chaos. The board wants answers now." Emily's breath caught. The way the men looked at Adrian, deference mixed with fear, confirmed everything she already knew. This was not her world. One of the men's eyes flicked to her. "Is she a liability?" The question cracked through the air like thunder. Adrian's pulse hammered. He saw Emily's face, pale, wide-eyed, her hands clenched at her sides. She didn't wait for his answer. Her voice broke as she whispered, "You don't have to say it. I already know." And before he could stop her, she turned and walked away, her figure shrinking against the gray morning light. Adrian stood frozen. The words he should have said, "She's not. She matters. She's the only thing that matters," lodged in his throat like stone. Instead, silence spilled from his mouth, the same silence that had cost him everything before. Emily didn't look back. She found herself wandering down the empty road, her boots splashing through shallow puddles. The drizzle had stopped, but the air smelled of ruin, wet asphalt, scorched earth, and something inside her breaking. She thought of her father's voice, of how he'd told her to never leave someone stranded. She had listened. She had given. And in return, she had been reminded of the same lesson life always seemed to deliver: compassion was weakness. Her heart thudded dully. She hated herself for caring. Behind her, the faint sound of raised voices carried from the diner lot. She didn't turn back. Adrian's men shoved files into his hands, demanding signatures, demanding strategy, demanding the man they knew, the ruthless Blackwell who never hesitated. But all Adrian could see was the blanket in the mud. The only symbol of warmth he had given in years, discarded and drenched. It felt like a piece of himself lying there, ruined. And the sight of it, so simple, so ordinary, hollowed him. For the first time in a long time, Adrian Blackwell wasn't angry. He was afraid. Afraid because he realized he had repeated the very betrayal that had destroyed him once. He had abandoned someone who had offered him trust with no strings attached. And this time, the silence might have cost him something he couldn't buy back. The storm had passed, but inside both of them, destruction reigned. Emily's hope in people, shattered. Adrian's chance at redemption, slipped through his fingers. All that remained was the echo of what might have been. And the mud-soaked blanket, symbol of kindness turned ruin, marking the lowest point of them both. The road stretched endless and gray before Emily, her footsteps slow, each one heavier than the last. The storm had scrubbed the world clean, but inside her chest everything felt wrecked and unfixable. The drizzle clung to her hair, her jacket, her lashes, but she didn't care. It was easier to feel the sting of cold rain than the ache rising inside her. She replayed his words, or worse, his silence. "Walk away. This is bigger than you." After everything she'd given him, her story, her vulnerability, her trust, he had reduced her to nothing more than a liability. Just like her mother had once reduced her to baggage, just like the world had taught Adrian to reduce people to pawns. "Stupid," she whispered to herself. The sound cracked in the still air. But beneath the anger, beneath the humiliation, was grief. Because some part of her, foolish and fragile, had begun to want more than survival from last night. She had wanted connection. Back at the diner lot, Adrian sat rigid in the back of the SUV, a stack of documents spread across his lap. His men spoke rapid-fire updates, but their words blurred into static. He couldn't focus. He kept seeing her face. The disbelief. The way her shoulders had curled inward like she was folding herself up before disappearing down the road. And the blanket, mud-stained, sodden. His failure staring back at him. "You'll need to confirm the merger statement before noon, sir," one of the men pressed. Adrian's pen stilled mid-signature. His voice came low. "No." The man frowned. "Sir." Adrian's gaze lifted, sharp as glass. "I said no. All of it can wait." The silence that followed was stunned. His men glanced at each other, uncomprehending. Adrian Blackwell had never said no to business. Not like this. Adrian leaned back, pressing his palms to his temples. His empire could burn, his board could riot, but the image of Emily walking away had undone something inside him that power could never mend. For the first time in years, he chose not the ruthless path, but the vulnerable one. "I have to find her," he said, more to himself than to them. Emily had made it half a mile before her legs betrayed her. She sank onto the guardrail of the deserted road, her breath coming in shaky bursts. Her phone was dead. She had no ride, no plan, no destination. For a woman who prided herself on resilience, the emptiness gnawed cruelly. She closed her eyes, pressing the heels of her palms into them. "Don't cry. Don't you dare cry." But the tears came anyway, hot and blurring. She hated herself for missing him already. For the hollow space where his words of reassurance should have been. And yet, as much as she tried to push it down, another truth whispered underneath. She had seen pieces of him last night no one else had. The architect's dream. The silence of his childhood home. The way he had told her she mattered. Those glimpses weren't lies. They couldn't be. Could they? Adrian's SUV sped down the road, his men exchanging worried looks as he barked directions. He scanned the shoulder with ruthless precision, eyes sharp for a figure in the distance. He had spent years convincing himself that needing no one made him untouchable. But last night had undone the lie. Emily had shown him a mirror he didn't want but desperately needed. She hadn't been a liability. She had been his proof that maybe, just maybe, trust wasn't a weapon after all. And he had destroyed it. But he refused to let the story end there. Emily wiped her face roughly with her sleeve and forced herself to stand. If he didn't want her in his world, fine. She would build her own again. She had survived worse. Still, her heart whispered treacherously, "What if you're wrong about him? What if he's as lost as you are?" The sound of tires in the distance made her head snap up. An SUV slowed on the horizon, dark and sleek, its headlights cutting through the mist. Her stomach knotted. She didn't need to see who it was. She already knew. Adrian's gaze locked onto her small figure at the roadside. Relief crashed into him, sharp and almost painful. But as the car rolled to a stop, he realized the hardest part wasn't finding her. It was what he would say. How do you apologize when silence had already spoken louder than any words? Emily stood motionless as the SUV idled before her. The passenger window lowered, revealing him inside. Their eyes met across the small divide, hers rimmed red from tears, his shadowed by something she couldn't quite name. Neither spoke. The rain began again, light but insistent, tapping against metal and glass. For a moment, it was just that sound, their locked gazes, and the unbearable question hovering between them. Would he let her walk away again, or choose her this time? The window stayed open between them, the drizzle misting through and cooling the space where silence pressed harder than words. Emily's chest rose and fell, her arms crossed as if holding herself together. Adrian sat rigid, every muscle taut with the effort of not looking away. Finally, he spoke. "Get in the car." Her laugh was bitter. "That's it? After everything? You expect me to just—" she broke off, shaking her head. "Unbelievable." Adrian leaned forward, his voice sharper. "Emily, please." The single word, "please," stripped the steel from his tone. Her breath hitched. She had never heard him sound like that, not commanding, not detached, but desperate. Her eyes narrowed. "Why? So I don't leak your secrets? So I'm not a liability?" Adrian flinched, the word cutting deeper because it was his own failure thrown back at him. "No," he said roughly. "Because I was wrong." Emily froze. He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture raw, unguarded. "I've spent years convincing myself trust is weakness. That letting anyone close meant giving them a blade to hold at my throat. And when those men asked if you were a liability," his voice cracked, "I let silence answer for me. Just like silence destroyed me before." Her throat tightened, but she held herself still. Adrian's eyes burned into hers. "You weren't a liability. You were the only part of last night that felt real. And he swallowed hard. I ruined it." The drizzle thickened, dotting the pavement between them. Emily's fingers gripped her jacket tighter, heart pounding in her ears. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But the ache of betrayal still throbbed inside her. "You can say that now," she whispered. "But what happens when your world demands you shut down again? When the board, or the press, or whoever decides I don't fit?" Adrian shook his head fiercely. Then they'll have to learn what it means to be irrelevant. His chest heaved. Because I'd rather lose everything than watch you walk away again. Emily blinked, stunned. This was Adrian Blackwell, the man who controlled empires, who could silence a room with a glance, telling her he'd risk it all. For her. And in his eyes, she saw no calculation, no strategy. Only truth. Her father's voice stirred inside her memory, never leave someone stranded. For a moment, she realized Adrian wasn't the one stranded on the road last night. She was. And he had stopped for her too, just not with headlights and hazard lights, but with the first fragile piece of honesty he'd given in years. Tears blurred her vision. She pulled open the SUV door and slid inside. Neither spoke as the driver pulled away. The storm's aftermath sprawled outside, branches littered the asphalt, puddles pooled in the dips of the road. Inside the car, the tension shifted from fractured to fragile, the air thick with possibility. Finally, Emily broke the silence. I don't need grand speeches, Adrian. I don't care about the board, or the company, or your billions. Her voice trembled, but steadied. I just need to know you won't disappear the second things get hard. He turned to her, his face raw, stripped of its mask. I won't. Not again. Her lip quivered, but she managed a shaky smile. Good. Because I don't stop for just anyone, you know. A laugh, unexpected, almost disbelieving, broke from his throat. He reached into the back seat, pulled the sodden blanket onto his lap, and shook his head. You stopped for a stranger who looked like hell. Emily glanced at the ruined fabric, mud-streaked and damp, and her heart softened. She reached over, brushing it with her fingers. And I'd do it again. Their eyes met, and this time, neither looked away. The SUV slowed as they neared town, emergency crews visible in the distance clearing storm wreckage. Red and blue lights flickered, reflecting off wet pavement. Life was beginning to move again. But inside the car, time felt suspended. Emily leaned back, exhaling deeply. So what happens now? Adrian considered the question, his gaze steady on her. Now. He took her hand, tentative but deliberate. Now, I learn how to stay. Even when it terrifies me. Her fingers tightened around his, and something inside her chest, fragile, aching but alive, mended. Later, when they stepped out together into the drizzle, the ruined blanket still in Adrian's hands, Emily stopped him. Leave it, she said softly. He frowned. She gestured to the mud where it had first fallen. It doesn't matter anymore. That's where it ended. We don't need it for where this begins. Adrian studied her for a long moment, then dropped the blanket gently onto the wet ground. For the first time, letting go didn't feel like weakness. It felt like freedom. They walked side by side toward the glow of town, two silhouettes against the washed-out morning. The storm had torn them apart, but it had also stripped them bare enough to finally see each other. And as Emily glanced up at Adrian, his shoulders less rigid, his eyes less haunted, she realized her father had been right all along. Stopping for a stranger wasn't weakness. It was the only way to find who you were meant to walk beside. If you've ever wondered whether kindness can change the unchangeable, or if love can disarm even the coldest heart, share this story. Because sometimes, the smallest choice, a pause on a dark road, rewrites everything.
Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this one, I promise you'll love the next. It's even crazier, more intriguing, and full of twists you won't see coming. So don't stop here. Click on the video showing on your screen right now, and let's jump straight into the next adventure together.